again, a referee in charge, Thomas Taylor, now to give instructions.
Red corner. Wearing black with fuchsia and red trim. When he stepped on the scale, he weighed in at an official 145.5 pounds. Started from the bottom now. He enters the ring, an undefeated three-division pound-for-pound king. With 24 of those victories coming by way of KO. The former undisputed super lightweight. And tonight, defense of his WBO welterweight championship of the world. Bred and repping Omaha, Nebraska, Terence Crawford.
Canelo Alvarez has not faced as educated.
Trying to come with a left up.
Lay on that left side.
Punching between punches and a flush.
Will try to hurt him here.
Another big right hand by Canelo. The right hand lead against the left.
Crawford boxing just took a wild turn after the shocking, controversial draw between Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach. Fans are now buzzing about an even bigger fight, Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez. As anticipation for a potential clash between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford reached a fever pitch, rumors began swirling about when and where the fight would take place. Industry insiders pointed to Mexican Independence Weekend in September 2024, a date that has historically been one of the biggest events in boxing, particularly for Mexican fighters. Holding the bout on this weekend in Las Vegas, the fight capital of the world, would have ensured a massive spectacle, complete with sold-out arenas, global pay-per-view sales, and an electric atmosphere filled with passionate fans from both camps. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Like this video and subscribe. 98% of you watch without subscribing, and it helps a ton. Done? Awesome. Now let's get into it. Behind the scenes, Saudi Arabian billionaire and chairman of the General Entertainment Authority, Turki Al Sheikh, had emerged as one of the sport's most influential power brokers, financing blockbuster fights and bringing some of boxing's most lucrative matchups to the Middle East. With his sights set on delivering the biggest fights possible, Al Sheikh publicly expressed interest in making a significant financial offer to Canelo Alvarez to entice him into facing Crawford. Saudi Arabia had already hosted major boxing events, including Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou and the anticipated showdown between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. Al Sheikh's involvement signaled that the fight had the financial backing to become one of the highest-grossing paydays in boxing history. However, negotiations quickly hit a roadblock when Canelo Alvarez's financial demands became the biggest hurdle. While Al Sheikh was prepared to offer a substantial purse, Canelo reportedly demanded $150 million to $200 million for the fight, an amount far exceeding what even the most lucrative fights in history had generated. This raised eyebrows across the boxing community. For comparison, Canelo had earned significantly less in past fights, even in marquee matchups against opponents like Gennady Golovkin and Floyd Mayweather. His demand was viewed by many as a deliberate tactic to price himself out of the fight, effectively shutting down discussions before they could gain momentum. Canelo's financial request also sparked controversy due to his apparent double standard in opponent selection. Despite demanding an astronomical payday for fighting Crawford, he had reportedly agreed to face Edgar Berlanga, an undefeated but relatively unproven contender, for a fraction of that amount, between $20 million to $30 million. This discrepancy led fans and analysts to question whether Canelo was truly interested in facing elite competition, or if he was strategically avoiding risky fights while still securing big paydays. As a result of these stalled negotiations, Al Sheikh made a decisive move. Rather than engaging in prolonged back-and-forth discussions with Canelo's camp, he publicly announced that he was walking away from the fight and would shift his focus to other major matchups in 2024 and 2025. In an official statement, he expressed his frustration with the situation, confirming that he would instead prioritize fights for other top talents, including Terence Crawford, Jaron "Boots" Ennis, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, and others. This move sent a clear message to Canelo: either accept realistic terms or be left out of the biggest boxing events being orchestrated on the global stage. With Al-Sheikh stepping away, the fight that had briefly captured the imagination of the boxing world was officially off the table, at least for the foreseeable future. However, the drama surrounding Canelo's demands and Crawford's pursuit of greatness only fueled speculation about what might come next for both fighters. Would Canelo reconsider and lower his demands? Or would he continue facing less dangerous opponents for big paychecks? Would Crawford shift his focus toward a more realistic opponent, or would he still hold out hope for the super fight he believed could define his legacy? The questions lingered, but one thing was certain: this saga had only just begun. What was initially expected to be a historic showdown between two undisputed champions quickly fell apart before it even had the chance to materialize. The biggest reason? Canelo Alvarez's astronomical financial demands. The Mexican superstar reportedly asked for a staggering $150 million to $200 million to face Terence Crawford, a sum that was far beyond what even the most lucrative fights in history had generated. Given that his previous fights against Gennady Golovkin, Caleb Plant, and Dmitry Bivol didn't even come close to those figures, many in the boxing world viewed this demand as a deliberate attempt to price himself out of the fight. Saudi Arabian promoter Turki Al-Sheikh, who had been aggressively pursuing the biggest fights in boxing, had already demonstrated that he was willing to pay fighters generously to make the most competitive matchups possible. He had successfully negotiated deals for major heavyweight bouts featuring Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, and Deontay Wilder, proving that money was not an issue if the fight was worth the investment. However, even Al-Sheikh, who had publicly stated that he was prepared to offer Canelo a good deal, was unwilling to meet such an inflated price tag. When Canelo outright rejected the offer, Al-Sheikh made a decisive move. He walked away from the fight entirely, refusing to engage in further negotiations. In a public statement, Al-Sheikh confirmed that he was shifting his focus away from Canelo Alvarez and would instead prioritize other marquee matchups in 2024 and 2025. Among his new targets were rising superstars like Terence Crawford, Jaron "Boots" Ennis, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, and Virgil Ortiz Jr., fighters who were hungry for major fights and willing to accept reasonable terms. Al-Sheikh's decision was a strong message, not just to Canelo, but to the entire boxing world. He would no longer waste time trying to convince fighters to take competitive matchups if they weren't truly interested. Canelo's response, or lack thereof, only added fuel to the speculation that he never intended to fight Crawford in the first place. Instead of making a counter-offer or attempting to renegotiate, he simply moved on, as if the fight was never an option, reinforcing the belief that his initial financial demands were nothing more than a strategic move to avoid the fight while saving face. Canelo Alvarez has long been criticized for carefully selecting his opponents, but his tactics surrounding the potential fight with Terence Crawford only intensified that perception. Many boxing analysts and fans believe that Canelo never truly wanted to face Crawford, not because of money, but because of the risk involved. Despite Crawford being the smaller fighter moving up in weight, he possesses a skill set that could have posed serious problems for Canelo: elite footwork, pinpoint accuracy, and an uncanny ability to make mid-fight adjustments. This wouldn't be the first time Canelo was accused of pricing himself out of a dangerous fight. A similar situation unfolded with David Benavidez, the undefeated two-time WBC super middleweight champion who had been calling out Canelo for years. When public pressure mounted for Canelo to defend his 168-pound belts against Benavidez, he demanded an excessive purse of $150 million to $200 million. Despite Benavidez being his WBC mandatory challenger and arguably the most deserving contender in the division, Benavidez, frustrated with the lack of progress, eventually moved up to 175 pounds to pursue fights in a new weight class, an outcome that conveniently relieved Canelo of any pressure to fight him. Now with Benavidez out of the picture, Canelo appeared to be using the same playbook against Terence Crawford. By demanding an outrageously high payday, he all but ensured that the fight would never happen, effectively dodging another elite-level opponent. This strategy allowed Canelo to maintain his undisputed status at 168 pounds without taking high-risk fights that could jeopardize his reputation and legacy. What made this situation even more suspicious was Canelo's willingness to fight Edgar Berlanga, an undefeated but unproven contender, for just $20 million to $30 million. While Berlanga is a popular fighter with an exciting style, he is nowhere near Crawford's level in terms of skill, experience, or accomplishments. The drastic difference in Canelo's financial expectations for different opponents raised serious questions about his intentions. If he was willing to fight a lower-tier opponent for a fraction of what he demanded for Crawford, was it really about money, or was it about avoiding a fight he wasn't confident he could win? Critics argue that Canelo is now in the parade retirement phase of his career, a point where he is still active but only taking low-risk fights for maximum financial reward. Ever since his loss to Dmitry Bivol in 2022, he has avoided rematching Bivol, despite Bivol offering to move down to 168 pounds to make the fight happen. Instead of taking fights that challenge him, Canelo has focused on matchups that allow him to maintain his star power without taking serious risks. This raises an even bigger question. Is Canelo Alvarez still interested in being the best, or is he now just protecting his legacy? If his recent actions are any indication, it seems like he is more concerned with controlling the narrative than proving himself against the toughest competition available. With the Crawford fight now officially off the table, the attention shifts to what's next for both fighters. Will Canelo continue facing lesser opponents while avoiding true challenges? Will Crawford shift his focus to more realistic opponents at 154 or 160 pounds? And most importantly, will the boxing world ever get the dream matchups it truly craves? Only time will tell. But for now, the Canelo versus Crawford fight is dead in the water, and Canelo's legacy is under more scrutiny than ever before. However, one thing was universally agreed upon. Canelo's hesitation to take the fight suggested that he saw Crawford as a legitimate threat. Teddy Atlas, renowned trainer and boxing analyst, is one of the most respected and blunt voices in the boxing world. The veteran trainer and analyst, known for his insightful and often fiery takes, made it clear that while Crawford's technical ability was beyond question, Canelo had a decisive edge in power and size. In his breakdown, Atlas pointed out that the biggest challenge for Crawford would be absorbing punches from a fighter who has been competing at much higher weight classes for years. Atlas also took a deeper dive into Canelo's reluctance to take the fight. He argued that if Canelo truly believed Crawford had no chance against him, he would have taken the fight without hesitation, knowing it would be an easy payday. The fact that he instead demanded an astronomical sum of money suggested that he saw Crawford as a serious danger, one that could disrupt his reign at 168 pounds. You don't ask for $150 million unless you're looking for a way out, Atlas remarked. Fighters like Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol had exploited Canelo's flat-footed, counterpunch-heavy style, and Ward believed Crawford had the same tools to do the same. Perhaps most notably, Ward dismissed the idea that size alone would dictate the outcome, reminding fans that boxing is a thinking man's sport, not just a physical one. I've seen Crawford break guys down who thought they were bigger, stronger, and tougher. I wouldn't bet against him no matter the weight difference. The verdict: a fight that will likely never happen. While opinions differed on who would have won, the consensus among boxing experts was that Canelo's reluctance to engage in serious negotiations proved he saw Crawford as a real threat, and not just another payday. Some analysts believed that size would eventually wear Crawford down, while others thought Crawford's skill set was more than enough to compensate for the weight difference. But in the end, none of these debates mattered, because the fight was never truly on the table. Not because of lack of interest from Crawford, but because of Canelo's financial demands and strategic avoidance. With the fight officially dead, attention now turns to what comes next for both fighters. Will Canelo continue picking safer fights, or will public pressure force him to take on a truly dangerous opponent? And will Crawford find another high-profile challenge that cements his legacy without the need to chase Canelo? One thing is certain: this fight may never happen, but the debate about what could have been will continue for years to come. The fallout from the failed Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford negotiations has ignited a firestorm of opinions across the boxing world. From die-hard fans to veteran analysts, reactions have been split between those who believe Canelo deliberately avoided a dangerous fight and those who argue that, as the sport's biggest star, he has the right to demand whatever terms he sees fit. Among the loudest voices in the conversation are fans who firmly believe that Canelo Alvarez intentionally priced himself out of the Crawford fight to avoid the risk of defeat. They argue that demanding an astronomical $150 to $200 million purse was never about securing a fair payday, but rather a strategic move to kill the fight before it could even begin. These critics point to a pattern in Canelo's recent matchmaking, where he has largely opted for less dangerous opponents rather than taking on the most deserving challengers. They cite his continued avoidance of David Benavidez and his lack of interest in rematching Dimitri Bivol, two fights that would have posed significant risks to his undisputed status. Many fans on social media have expressed frustration with Canelo's double standard when it comes to financial demands. If he's willing to fight Edgar Berlanga for a fraction of the price, $20 to $30 million, why does he need $150 million to fight Crawford? As of now, Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford is officially dead. There will be no historic showdown between the two undisputed champions. No clash of styles between boxing's most explosive counterpuncher and its most technically gifted tactician. What was once imagined as a fight for the ages has become yet another what-if scenario in boxing history. But while the fight may not happen, the controversy surrounding it is far from over. The only question that remains is whether Canelo Alvarez will ever take another high-risk fight, or if he will continue down the path of legacy preservation over legacy building. One thing is for sure: boxing fans will not forget this anytime soon. All right, fight fans, stay ahead of the game with the latest boxing news, epic moments, and major events. Subscribe to Boxing is Here, turn on notifications, and never miss a beat. Plus, don't forget to check out our other videos for more must-see content.